giant piece of ice broke off from an Antarctic ice shelf, revealing an ecosystem on the seafloor that has never been accessible to humans.
Antarctica just gave up a secret it has been guarding for half a millennium, and it's enough to make your skin crawl. A Chicago-sized iceberg detached from the coast, and when the cameras finally went down to see what was left, the researchers fell into a stunned silence. And get this, the seafloor wasn't empty. It was covered in massive ancient structures and giants that seemed to belong in a science fiction movie. What most people don't realize is that this isn't just a nature discovery. It's a warning. And that's putting it lightly, because the clock is ticking for the rest of the ice. Sub-Zero Life Discovery. January 13, 2025 was the day the map of Antarctica changed forever. A massive chunk of the George VI ice shelf, known as Iceberg A84, finally snapped. This was not just some small block of ice. We are talking about a potato-shaped monster measuring 19 miles by 11 miles. To put that in perspective, that is 209 square miles, which is nearly the same size as the entire city of Chicago. For decades, this massive slab of ice had acted like a giant lid, sealing off a huge section of the Bellingshausen Sea from the rest of the world. No light, no fresh oxygen, and no food had reached the seafloor underneath for hundreds of years. Most scientists assumed that once the ice moved, they would find a biological desert. They expected to see nothing but gray mud and perhaps a few rocks dropped by the melting shelf. But here's the catch. When an international team of researchers aboard the ship Falker arrived at the site, they were in for the shock of their lives. They used a high-tech remote-controlled vehicle called Sebastian to dive 1,640 feet into the freezing depths. As the cameras flickered to life on the bottom, the team in the control room went completely silent. It's not that simple, though, because what they saw didn't look like Antarctica. It looked like a tropical reef made of nightmares. Instead of a dead zone, they found a thriving, colorful, and incredibly dense ecosystem. There were massive corals reaching over 3 feet tall, glowing glass sponges that looked like delicate vases, and fields of anemones waving in the current. Sebastian ROV lights illuminating a bright, dense reef of white sponges and orange corals on the dark seafloor. The team was looking at a hidden world that had been flourishing in total darkness. The data from the Sebastian showed that in some spots, there were more than 50 different species living in every single square yard of the seafloor. This level of biodiversity is almost unheard of in the deep polar oceans. It was like finding a secret forest hidden under a parking lot. The crazy part is that these creatures weren't just surviving, they were dominating. The total weight of all the living things on the seafloor was estimated at nearly 4 pounds per square yard. That is comparable to the richest shallow reefs found in much warmer parts of the world. For the divers and scientists watching the feed, it was a moment of pure disbelief. They had expected to find a graveyard, but instead they found a masterpiece of evolution. What most people don't realize is how difficult it is for life to exist under an ice shelf. Without sunlight, there are no plants or phytoplankton to form the base of the food chain. So, how did this Chicago-sized city of creatures stay fed for centuries? The researchers believe that strong ocean currents were acting like a conveyor belt, pumping nutrient-rich water from the open ocean deep under the ice. This allowed the filter feeders, like the glass sponges, to trap tiny bits of food and grow to massive sizes over hundreds of years. Carbon dating on some of the sponge samples later suggested that these communities are between 200 and 500 years old. This means they were there long before the modern warming of the peninsula began. Everything about this discovery was pushing the limits of what biologists thought was possible. They found ice fish from the Nototheniidae family, which have evolved incredible ways to stay alive in water that is actually below the freezing point of fresh water. These fish produce special antifreeze proteins that keep their blood from turning into ice crystals. But wait, it gets even weirder. Some of these fish don't even have red blood cells. They have completely lost the ability to produce hemoglobin, making their blood clear and their bodies almost transparent. This is a key detail because it shows just how much these animals have adapted to a world that is completely alien to us. But even this discovery couldn't prepare them for the scale of the ancient shelf itself. Floating giant drifts. The George VI ice shelf is one of the most important pieces of the Antarctic puzzle. It covers over 9,000 square miles and is pinned between the Antarctic Peninsula and Alexander Island. For thousands of years, it has sat there like a massive frozen bridge. However, the data from the British Antarctic Survey shows that things are changing fast. Since the 1980s, this ice shelf has lost 10% of its total area. That might not sound like much until you realize the sheer scale of the ice we are talking about. The peninsula has seen a temperature rise of about 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 50 years. This warming isn't just happening in the air, it's happening in the water. A map of the Antarctic Peninsula showing the George VI shelf turning from white to light blue as the water underneath turns red to indicate heat. The birth of Iceberg A84 was a violent event. NASA satellites tracked the berg as it detached and began to ricochet along the coastline. It was pushed by powerful ocean currents that moved millions of tons of water every second. As the iceberg moved, it scraped across the seafloor, leaving behind massive scars and ridges. The mapping done by the research ship revealed that the seafloor varies between 1,300 and 1,900 feet deep in this area. These deep troughs were carved out by the ice itself over thousands of years of grounding and moving. So, here's the deal. When an ice shelf this big disappears, it's like opening a pressure valve. The glaciers behind the shelf, which were once held back by the weight of the ice, start to flow faster into the sea. This is what scientists call the cork in the bottle effect. Without the George VI ice shelf, the ice on the land starts to slide into the ocean, which is what actually causes sea levels to rise around the world. The loss of A84 is just one symptom of a much larger problem. The peninsula is warming at a rate of about 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit every decade. This is way faster than the global average, making Antarctica the front line of the climate crisis. During the mission in 2025, the scientists used multi-beam sonar to create a three-dimensional map of the newly exposed seafloor. They found evidence of ancient ice movements that hadn't been seen in thousands of years. The sediment cores they pulled from the bottom showed layers of organic carbon, which confirms that this area has been productive for a very long time. It wasn't just a lucky break, it was a stable environment that had been protected by the ice for centuries. But now that the ice is gone, the environment is changing rapidly. The crazy part is that within just a few weeks of the ice clearing, the water was already filling with life from the upper layers of the ocean. Sunlight hit the water for the first time in ages, and phytoplankton blooms began to explode. NASA ocean data detected high levels of chlorophyll A, which is basically the green pigment in plants. This means that the seafloor community is about to get a massive influx of new food. While this might seem like a good thing, it also means that new, faster-growing species might move in and take over the home of the ancient, slow-growing glass sponges. This warming was only the beginning of a much larger shift in the Antarctic ecosystem. Thriving polar reefs. Hands down, the most terrifying thing found under the ice was the giant sea spiders. These creatures, known as Pycnogonida, aren't actually spiders like the ones you find in your house, but they look like they crawled right out of a horror movie. In the rest of the world, sea spiders are tiny, usually the size of a fingernail. But in the cold waters of Antarctica, they experience something called polar gigantism. Under the A84 iceberg, the team found sea spiders with leg spans of nearly 12 inches. A giant, bright orange sea spider crawling slowly over a white glass sponge, its long legs stretching out wide. They are so big because the water is incredibly rich in oxygen. Cold water holds much more oxygen than warm water, and because these spiders have very slow metabolisms, they can grow to these massive sizes. And get this, their bodies are so small that they don't even have room for all their organs. Instead, their digestive systems and even their reproductive organs are located inside their long, spindly legs. They spend their lives slowly crawling over the sponges and anemones, sucking the life out of them with a straw like proboscis. Seeing dozens of these giant orange monsters moving across the white seafloor was enough to make anyone fall silent. But the spiders weren't alone. The Sebastian also captured footage of the Perelodon octopus. These are small, hardy octopuses that have adapted to live in the sub-zero temperatures of the Southern Ocean. Unlike most octopuses, which have blue blood based on copper, these Antarctic species have evolved to keep their blood moving even when the temperature drops below freezing. They are the top predators of this hidden sea floor, hunting for small crustaceans and worms in the dark. The glass sponges themselves are a marvel of biology. They are called glass sponges because their skeletons are made of silica, which is the same material used to make glass. They don't have nervous systems or muscles, but they can live for hundreds of years. They act like the skyscrapers of the seafloor, providing homes for hundreds of other smaller creatures. The biodiversity surveys found over 300 unique types of organisms using eDNA analysis. This technology allows scientists to detect the presence of animals just by looking at the DNA they leave behind in the water. It's like being a detective at a crime scene, but instead of fingerprints, they are looking for the genetic code of a hidden world. What's really interesting is that this ecosystem is much more diverse than the one found under the Larsen C ice shelf back in 2017. The sponge diversity here is 30% higher. This suggests that the area under the George VI shelf is a unique hotspot for life. Scientists believe that the specific shape of the seafloor here traps nutrients and creates a perfect cradle for these ancient communities. However, as the ice continues to retreat, these specialists are facing a brand new world. However, these bizarre creatures face a threat much larger than just the warming water. Guarded ice frontiers. Basically, the discovery under A84 has started a massive debate in the scientific community. By early 2026, the original iceberg had already fragmented into 3 smaller pieces. These chunks of ice are now drifting northward at a rate of about 0.6 miles every day. As they move, they are melting and dumping billions of tons of fresh water into the salty ocean. This fresh water can actually change the ocean currents, which act as the global heart of the planet's climate. The British Antarctic Survey has reported that if the George VI shelf continues to melt at its current rate, it could lose another 20% of its area by the year 2050. That would release enough water to equal 10 billion tons of ice. This isn't just a local problem. Every bit of ice that melts in Antarctica contributes to the rising sea levels in New York, Miami, and London. Scientists estimate that the current rate of melting in this specific region adds about 0.004 inches to the global sea level every single year. That sounds tiny, but when you add it all up across the entire continent, it's enough to drown coastal cities within our lifetime. There is also an economic side to this story. The waters around Antarctica are home to a massive krill fishery, with a quota of about 300,000 tons every year. Krill are tiny shrimp-like creatures that are the base of the food chain for whales, seals, and penguins. As the ice disappears, the fishing fleets can move further south into areas that were once protected by the ice. This discovery of a thriving reef under A84 has led to calls for new marine protected areas. In 2026, international meetings were held to discuss making these newly exposed seafloors no-take zones where no fishing or mining can ever happen. The thing is, we are running out of time to study these places before they change forever. The use of AI-enhanced image analysis has helped scientists catalog 80% of the species found by the Sebastian automatically. This has sped up the research significantly, but the environment is changing faster than we can document it. We are seeing a 15% increase in calving frequency since the year 2000. Antarctica is literally shedding its skin, and what's being revealed is both beautiful and terrifying. Could there be even larger, more alien worlds still hiding under the remaining ice shelves? The discovery under A84 proves that we know more about the moon than our own oceans. What do you think is waiting for us in the deepest parts of Antarctica? If you enjoyed this mystery, make sure to like and subscribe for more.